The video that we just saw, Khadar Ki Ladkiyan, I would just like to take this opportunity to talk about that. It's a hip hop song written, sung, and performed by young women living in Madanpur Khadar. It's a resettlement colony in South Delhi. The song charts their stories of forced eviction as well as their daily struggles with poor infrastructure, transportation, and gender based violence. This was part of the Gendering the Smart City project done in the partnership with Dr. Ayuna Datta and Jaguri. What began as WhatsApp Diaries, a project to understand the journeys between physical and digital spaces in the city, it turned into a rich co production of visual language, highlighting how young women are excluded from the city while riding the tide of smart cities. And yes, it has a catchy and charged undertone saying, "More power to you, sisters, more power to you." I hope you all enjoyed the song. And now that we have seen young women, young people are change makers. But are they also evidence builders? Let's find about that. We have the next panel discussion on cities for youth with young people as evidence builders. And we have Joyati Das with us to moderate the session. I would like to invite Ms. Joyati Das to join us on the stage. Joyati Das is a practitioner. Ms. Joyati Das is a practitioner, a human rights advocate, a development sector leader who has tirelessly promoted voice and participation of young people in shaping sustainable cities. She's a global speaker on several UN forums promoting youth representation at various platforms to inform national and global agendas. Currently, Joyati is Enterprise Principal Fellow at the Centre for Cities, University of Melbourne, leading the Evidence to Action Framework project supported by Fondation Botnar. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sonali, for that welcome and introduction. I want to congratulate Safetipin for all the hard work which we are hearing now. Yes, I am short, thank you, which we are hearing now. And just the evidence of all this hard work, the investments that the whole team, and especially Kalpana, who has led this last 10 years, and my, of course, interactions with her in several cities around the world and at the UN forums where we work together on the new urban agenda. I am just so delighted and privileged to be here to share these moments of celebrations with you all, especially the team, cutting edge, stellar team that you have put together, and the movements that you have started. Now, joining me on the panel today, it is not about, what we are all doing, the discussions we heard. There's just enormous amount of work that is happening. And someone who grew up in this city, coming back after, every year after being away for 30 years out of this city, it is just it is very heartening, and it is also very encouraging to see the number of players, stakeholders, those who are now joining this movement to bring equity, to bring gender balance, and addressing power, inequities and power imbalances. It is really, really a privilege. Joining me on the panel, can I please invite my panelists, is Anshul Tewari. Yes, please come. Prerna Mehta, Sohini Bhattacharya, Moitreyee Sinha, Kanak Tiwari, and Sonali herself. Hold on. How many do we have? Do we have? There is a place for me, yes. I'm so glad. Hello. So, I was just taking notes of all the different speakers, and I found that the word data came everywhere. Everyone's, conversation, people were talking about narratives have to be then turned into data and the power of data. Who else knows the power of data but the young people who, I think the millennials, were born with computers there in the room and their parents working on it. So this is where the digital natives and those, they are the digital natives. They are the ones who are observing the city changing. They are the ones who are knowledge bearers, because who goes to play, hang around, find the right places, public spaces to, play cricket, play the football, play the, the little games that they want to. Plus, as adolescents, the hang-around spaces, they are the ones who know the nooks and corners of the city, and they observe. But unfortunately, in my 25 years of work in the NGO sector, and now with also Fondation Botnar's projects, as well as University of Melbourne's research program that we've started with evidence building, we find that youth voice and participation is not established in any of the cities that 25 countries. I say that mechanisms are not there. There is a huge gap, and their voice, their experience, their lived experiences, their narratives are missing, and they are not able to have that dialogue with the policymakers, with those who are the decision makers in the city. So without further, I think what we would like to do actually is watch a video of what Safetipin has done. And is that what we are doing now? Yeah? Yeah. And then we will invite our...
Okay, I'm ready. Rolling. Hi guys, it's me Nikita. It's 9 p.m. and I'm outside here. I cannot see anything here because it's so dark. Okay, let's take a step back. I'm Nikita. I'm 21 years old and this is my city. I live in Jaipur and I have always lived here with my parents. I'm making this video so that I can share my experience with you. I know many of you might have the same problem as me. You might be at home right now because once the sun sets, I know none of you feel safe to come out and explore your own city. How sad is that? Some people don't feel a connection with their cities, but that's not the case with me. I've always felt at home here. I see the potential of Jaipur, that it has a lot to offer to young people and they can feel very comfortable here. But some other times, in some corners of the city, I just feel unsafe. There are sometimes inadequate lighting, not enough people on the streets, the footpaths are not well done. I enrolled in Cities for Youth program last year. Because of all these issues, I got to know about it through someone I know, and I just knew that I had to enroll for it. So in the same program, me and some of my friends, we came across this app which would help us identify some dark and unsafe spots in the city by exploring it. पद्मा देखो यहाँ पे कितना कूड़ा है।
हाँ, यहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा कूड़ा रहता है, बहुत ज़्यादा गंदगी रहती है यहाँ पे।
So last year we conducted approx 1500 plus audits in less than a month. We considered multiple parameters for it, such as if there's enough street light, if the footpaths are well done, if there are enough people there, and what are their genders, and what do you feel at that very particular spot. We did not do this alone. We received the training and support from the Safetipin team. Safetipin is the company which developed the My Safetipin app.
प्ले स्टोर पे जाके माई सेफ्टिपिन ऐप को डाउनलोड करें। एक डेमो ऑडिट हम यहाँ पे आज करेंगे। प्रॉपर से आप लोगों को इसको रीड करना है।
Without data, proper steps cannot be taken, and if so many young people do it together, there will be enough data to show it to the stakeholders, and that even makes it more important for me considering so many of us are doing this. I already feel very empowered because of this. This gives me an excuse to not just go out in the city it gives me an excuse to go out and own it. I think that as young people, we are very capable of tackling our own challenges in the city. We can discuss them and share our experiences and learn from them and identify different problems. I also think that as we are young, so it's important for us to also see the good part of the city and not just the bad part. At some point, someone has to take an initiative, and I'm very proud that I'm the one taking this step in my city. I want to be the change and not just witness it. Through this video, I want to let you know that we don't have to wait for the changes to happen. We have the power to make the changes happen.
So here we are, an example of youth as data gatherers, co-producers of knowledge and evidence builders. Let me introduce you to my first panelist. Anshul Tewari is founder of Youthi Awaaz. Anshul is a social entrepreneur and the founder. India's largest, your company, your agency is India's largest media platform for young people to speak up and create an impact. Anshul has worked across media, technology, citizen advocacy to build and scale community-driven models of change. He's a Ashoka Fellow for Social Entrepreneurship and was named a Young Innovator by the United Nations ITU in 2012. Anshul, over to you. In India, the question I have for you is, in India, more than half the population is under 30. So when we were talking about it right now, that young people are given the opportunity to lead, as you saw, in advocating for solutions to address their well-being. They not only contribute to the betterment of their communities, but build their own capacity and empower themselves as informed, active citizens. Could you please reflect on, this, your experience in building these capacities? And are young people able to amplify their voices enough through social media? How important is democratization of technology to ensure their reach and role as change makers? There are 3 questions. I can come back to it, but for you to get started.
Thank you so much. And first of all, congratulations to Safetipin and Kalpana and team for all the absolutely phenomenal work that they've done over the last decade. It's actually a very loaded question because on one side, the last 15 years of building YKA, I have seen what can really happen when young people decide to speak up, come together. On the other side, I've also seen how difficult it is for young people to be taken seriously. Something as simple as that. So I think we have to break this problem down in 2 or 3 aspects. First is there is a cultural norm that says that if you're young, it doesn't matter what you say because somebody else knows better, somebody else has better experience, somebody else has a lot more informed perspective into what's really happening in the world. And I think that's where the problem really begins. What we are doing is we are giving a broken world to young people and expecting them to comply, but also fix it. And I think that's a huge problem. We are setting the wrong expectations from young people. So how do we then look at it differently? I think first is we need to stop looking at young people as a pathway for social change. We have to give them a higher degree of ability to actually take decisions for themselves and about their communities. If they are to inherit it, if they are to become decision makers, then that work needs to start today. It cannot start tomorrow. You can't put young people on a pathway that has already been done, beaten down, doesn't lead to the kind of outcomes that we hope it would lead to or we hoped it would lead to. You have to rethink the whole process in itself, change power structures. That's the first thing to do. When I was much younger than I am right now, when I started YK, I remember getting invited for multiple events and being the only young person there. And very often, like soon enough, I kind of realized that there was a reason why that was happening, because I was fitting a certain block that somebody thought, okay, this is an ideal young person to get for a certain kind of an event. And that's at the same time, you had thousands of people who were writing on the Youth Kiosk platform, all sorts of things. And it struck me, at what point does speaking up or collaboration get viewed as a contrarian position that young people are taking? At what point does a young person's voice start getting perceived as something you don't want to listen to because it's so different from how you're thinking? And I think that's the world we're still living in. Unfortunately, we often think about this at YK that, okay, we wanted to get people to speak up, and now people are speaking up. But one of the most important aspects of that entire journey is other people actually listening. Is that happening? Not really. It still is not happening. Of course, organizations like Safetipin are doing phenomenal work. But I think to flip the system, we probably need 100 organizations like Safetipin to engage with millions of more young people. Is there space for more such organizations to emerge? Maybe. It's a very tight system that all these organizations operate, and I'm sure there are multiple challenges that every entrepreneur goes through to build such institutions and systems. So in itself, the system itself is very discouraging of more innovative ideas, more innovation by young people coming through. And that's broadly what the scenario, the problem statement looks like, right? Now, talking about what can we really do to fix this, I think first thing that we need to do is, of course, more young people on the table. We don't need youth advisory boards. We need young people on advisory boards. That's the difference that we need to make, firstly. Second thing that I think we need to do is we need to create systems where organizations who are working with young people can work with governance institutions to create structures, frameworks that can actually be adopted. And of course, there the bigger challenge of actual acceptance from governance institutions also comes in, which is where organizations that have been working on public policy for many years, people who come with a tremendous amount of experience, can actually help. They can help in bridging the gap, right? And I think the third very important thing that we need to do is to encourage innovation or action or community building by young people. We have to look at it as a cultural problem. This is a cultural issue that young people are not taken seriously. Their issues are not given the same regard as everybody else's. They're not included in decision making. This is not just a government problem. This is a family problem as well. How many times in a family institution a decision is taken for a young person without consulting with them? Every single day, every time, in so many families, right? So I think it's a very big cultural problem that requires it to be looked at from that lens. It needs that cultural shift, and I think that's where technology plays a role. And technology also has two sides of it, right? On one end, you have the good tech, how I like to see it. The good tech is stuff like what Safetipin has done, what we are trying to build, many other organizations are trying to build. And on the other side, you have, I won't call it the bad tech, but I would call it the weird tech. And that's your larger social media. It's like a public park where everybody exists, and there's too much stimulation happening constantly. You're switching emotions every single second. That's what's really happening on that weird tech. Unfortunately, the good tech is small. The weird tech is huge. It's unbeatable. It's unbearable. It's such an integral part of our lives. We cannot let go of it. And it's such an integral part of our lives that you can keep hating it, but 20 minutes down the line, when I'm sitting in a cab, I'll be scrolling through reels, right? It's that big a part of our existence in our lives. And I think the problem that hence is happening is that people are limiting expression because they're seeing so much every single day. Information flow has grown so much every single day that attention deficit is now taking place in a much bigger manner than we would have imagined, say, 10 years ago. When social media came about, everybody thought that, it's going to solve all our problems, it's going to connect people. It did just one thing. It accentuated the existing problems that we had. It amplified it. 15 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said that social media is going to solve all our problems, because that's the motivation that I started Youth Here was with. 15 years on, I relook at it and I think that, okay, maybe social media actually derailed things a little bit, and the speed at which it grew, it became too big of a public good with very little governance structure in place, with very little accountability in place. So I think the way we are looking at technology is twofold. We need more support for the good tech to become bigger, for it to become institutional, for it to scale, for it to reach people to a degree that weird tech has actually reached. We want to be able to be in a place societally where both are sort of at the same degree. Secondly, we also need a little bit of a stronger governance structure of what information flow on this weird tech aspect of technology access really looks like. So today, you have problems like misinformation, you have problems like technology facilitated gender-based violence, which is just like we're just beginning to talk about it. And what we're not even talking about is what AI is going to do to a lot of these things, right? The challenge is we've seen what happens when social media becomes too big. It impacts elections, it impacts civic integrity, it impacts civic virtue. And knowing all of it, we are not really looking at emerging tech like AI, for example, from the same lens, when we actually should be preparing ourselves already for the adverse impacts that a emerging AI tech can actually have on young people. And we're seeing this every single day. Just on Youth Ki Awaaz, and we don't directly work on technology facilitated GBV, just on Youth Ki Awaaz, on a weekly basis, we're getting stories of young women from across the country who are talking about how somebody used AI to replicate their profile, to do something else, to leak their information, and so on and so forth. And this is happening, and these are just the people who are actually talking about it. So you can imagine the scale that it's already happening at. So I think I've tried to say quite a few things. If I was to just sum it up very quickly, I think we need to aim for a cultural shift where young people are taken more seriously, brought in the room at the right time, put in decision-making positions at the right moment. We need to create a system where existing structures and organizations that have the access provide that access. And we need to look at technology, which has often been seen as just a facilitator. We need to look at how information flow is actually impacting young people and their ability to create more collaborative communities, as opposed to more individualistic mindset, which we're seeing a lot more of today.
Thank you. That was a loaded question, and you gave us a very loaded answer. Yeah. But I would like to say that some of the things that you are talking about is, it is potentially how do we make cities more inclusive of, gender, of course, but young people, women, young women. You're also saying we don't need youth advisory boards. We need to be at the table. I would like to, just leave you with this question. I will bring you back to give me an example of, okay, is there a case study you can say where young people were brought in at the table and they had an impact? They were able to share something. I'll bring you back. But my next speaker is Prerna Mehta. She's Associate Director of Urban Development at World Resources Institute, India. She manages work on practice areas, climate smart cities, livable neighborhoods, innovation, capacity building. The key subject of your work has included climate smart cities assessment framework, transit-oriented development, public spaces, tactical urbanism, we hear that, safe access. Prerna, the question, you are leading the Healthy Cities for Adolescents program here, funded by Botnar Foundation, right? Can you share with us the objectives of this project? And reflect on the strategies applied to generate evidence from young people, the group that you are working with are adolescents. And how is this initiative promoting young people's participation, especially girls, and ensuring youth are able to produce evidence and share their lived experiences, their reflections in a systematic manner that can be leveraged for city planning?
Thanks, Joyati. And first of all, congratulations, Safetipin, on this landmark. This project is, actually that should have been in the list of the projects that I do. One of the very interesting and I would say a very milestone project for us. And I'm going to start, just step back and start with a quote by Benjamin Franklin. And it goes as follows. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. And involve me and I learn. So I'm going to park this as my starting point. And you will see that when I speak about the HCA initiative and the project that we're doing under this initiative, it has this inspiration ingrained in it. When we started our journey for this with this particular initiative by the Botnar Foundation. We started the journey with the intent to create safe, vibrant, and healthy public spaces. Now, this particular initiative and this particular project was, it basically got conceived from the very fact that the connection between youth and public spaces is really, really critical, and it is a clear gap. So that's the first thing that sort of came to our mind when we started to understand what HCA initiative is, what they want to target, what they want to work for. And that's where this whole conversation of public spaces and adolescents started. We curated this project with somewhat ambitious objectives. We had 3 objectives, which were meaningful engagement of youth or adolescents so that they can be empowered to become change agents. And this is something that Anshul really touched upon, that we need to empower them to become change agents. We can't say that, we can't expect something from them. We need to make sure that they are enabled to be able to do that. We wanted to create a proof of concept. So when we started to talk about this kind of initiative, this kind of project, whether we went to public sector agencies, we went to the local NGOs who are working with adolescents, they said that, how do we understand this? What is the proof of concept that you have? Can you show us? Can you give us an example? So that became one of our objectives, that we need to create this proof of concept. And then the whole standard conversation of increasing capacities of whoever is the stakeholder in the room. But then all of this that we wanted to do had one very clear bottom line, that it has to have a meaningful inclusion of youth and adolescents in the conversation. Now, what does meaningful inclusion mean for us? And for that, we started to apply several strategies. The first step towards that was actually going and talking to them. Very simple strategy, just listen what they're saying, just hear them out. Ask them what do they understand by public spaces? What do they understand? What do you think that their cities are offering to them? And you will be surprised the kind of information that you get from them. So that was our first strategy. The second strategy was to sort of understand their interest, whether they are interested to work with us, collaborate with us, whether they want to be part of this conversation. The third one was to understand their needs for this particular element in the cities. So it was a need conversation with adolescents for a very, very long time. 7-8 months we invested to just understand what they want. And this basically led to one of the tools that we prepared, and we are calling it as public spaces assessment tool or as audit tool. It's an audit tool, which is basically another strategy to be able to empower these youth to actually capture what they're thinking and bring their perspective. One is you talk about data in numbers. The other is you talk about data in narration, in anecdotes, in experience, in perspective. So we wanted to bring that element in the project. The next strategy that we adopted was that the big, effective strategy that we have been sort of talking about for a long time is learning by doing. We never wanted to lecture them. We said that this is not going to work because adolescent is an age of 10 years to 19 years, and it's early, mid, and late adolescence. You have varied reactions, very, very different input from each age group coming across the table. So how do you create that interest? So we said that very clearly we can't lecture them. You can't ask a 10-year child to sit for 4 hours, 3 hours and listen to us. Why will they do that? So we said that we are going to give you tasks. We actually involve them to have a hands-on experience on when they go on ground, what kind of public spaces they are accessing, how they are accessing, what is the kind of experience that they have when they are doing all of that. And that really worked very, very well for us. And they started to actually capture the data themselves. They said that this is dirty, this is nice, this is not working, there's no water, there's no toilets, we cannot access, this is very far, this is very near, so on and so forth. And good and bad both. It's just I remember the first conversation we said that you tell us what is good or bad in this particular area. And they actually went ahead and captured it through pictures, through narration, through drawings. All of that became data for us. And then we said that, fine, this is one step ahead. What do they want now from here on? So they said that we want to work more on this. We want to understand this and make sure how we can contribute to this conversation. So we actually went ahead and we gave them a make-believe public space, and we said that you create your public space. And they created models. They created models which can actually be compared to any architecture models that professionals like us might create. So that became really inspiring for us to dwell more, understand more, move with them, take with them more. The next strategy was to formally collaborate with them. So this was very important for us because to be able to speak to adolescents and children, it's very difficult to get their time. Honestly, their schedules are busier than ours. So how do we get them in the room? And there we collaborated with city partners who have been working with adolescents for a very, very long time, more than 20, 25 years of their work in the city. And that also enabled us to get adolescents in the room on a regular basis, on a consistent basis. They helped us to reach out to those adolescents who never had an exposure on what is the city offering to them. They don't understand this concept of city offering them something. They just understand the concept of that everyday struggle of how they are surviving, how they are moving in the city, how they are fighting for their basic education, food, etc. But then how can they move beyond that and actually become valuable to the city ecosystem? Now, taking a segue from there, we also sort of started parallelly to speak to the public sector authorities. And we, at the first instant, we were asked that, show us what have you done. We need to see what have you done. So our effort sort of focused on creating that data, creating that evidence to be able to showcase that, see, this is what the youth can actually do for you. They can become the eyes and ears of the city. You don't have to do much. You don't have to ask them to come and start, becoming a labor. No, you just have to use their intellect, their tech savviness to become the eyes and ears of the community and the neighborhoods that they are living in. So slowly, this conversation is turning around, and we will see how this unfolds moving forward. So I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Prerna. This is really, examples of practical action that you have taken. But most importantly, what Anshul, you raised was that there are cultural norms in our societies that young people remain young till they are out of the, they are of a certain age. What you did was you asked them to speak. Their micro narratives became really important for you. They became data. You asked them to collaborate. You asked them to participate and gave them that real notion of being valued participants in the city. And I think those are the strategies that have been, turning point of how they have found their worth through this project. We'll hear more from you a little bit later, but let me bring my third speaker, Sohini Bhattacharya. Sohini is with the Breakthrough India. She's the CEO of Breakthrough, an organization, a rights-based organization focused on transforming gender norms and building the leadership of young people to prevent gender-based violence. Sohini has worked in the development sector for 3 decades with the focus on women and empowerment, and she has been closely connected with the women's movement in India. You have also co-founded Sanhita Gender Resource Center, the first of its kind in Eastern India. I did my research. Okay. All right. So the question I really want you to reflect on, given your agency's focus on education and gender advocacy and your own contribution to women's movement in India, can you share how Breakthrough has promoted young girls and women's voices through issue-based innovative national campaigns, various platforms of engagement that have been established to encourage young people and women to share their lived experiences, which are difficult and often dismissed? We are hearing from Anshul and other young leaders on this. So how do you legitimize their narratives? And Prerna has given us some practical examples and turn these into evidence for policy action. And our previous panel, everyone talked about data for policy actions. Over to you.
Thank you. Congratulations to Safetipin and Kalpana. I'm sorry if I sound like Amitabh Bachchan, but I have a very bad, throat. So pardon my speaking in this low baritone. Breakthrough is a 23-year-old organization, and we've been working to transform gender norms by building the leadership of young people. We actually constantly peg away at shall I dare to say, patriarchal, norms and expectations. I'm very scared of speaking that word in gatherings, but I know I can safely speak that here. So patriarchal norms and expectations. And we've actually created a gender equity curriculum that we teach at government school. And with about 1 million adolescents who have gone through that gender equity curriculum. And now we are building a systems change education, a school system with governments in Punjab and Orissa to bring in more gender into the education space. One of the ways in which we've been working with young people to build their capacity to tell stories have been with the slightly older adolescents in the age group of 15 to 18 and then 19 to 24-year-olds by actually working with them on a social ecological model. These are youngsters who come out of a gender equity curriculum, which is meant for 11 to 14-year-old, and then they kind of become what we call Roshan Tara. The curriculum is called Taro Ki Toli, or Gang of Stars, and Roshan Tara is stars which are just starting to kind of bloom. And the Roshan Taras actually follow a social ecological model, which is a movement from individuals to families to communities and then largely institutions. So they take actions for themselves, they transform themselves, they inspire others to do so. They take community action and bring changes in the neighborhood. And then through schools, we are hoping that they will be the ones to ask and demand for more gender equitable materials in school curriculum and other things. One of the pillars of our work is media and storytelling and popular culture, and we find that actually is very engaging for young people. We've often, when we work with the 18 plus, we always, ask them, whether they would like to get trained on photography or video making or, social media, how to use social media. And then their content is actually placed on our website as voices of young people. So constantly uplifting that. And in here, I just would like to kind of bring in the whole concept of data and storytelling. Social media being the behemoth that it is, and Anshul spoke about it, why can't we look at an Instagram reel made by a young person on the changes in her life as evidence rather than constantly pushing for data and, big data and big statistics? And here I'm going to again use the F word, which also I'm very scared of using. Feminist methodologies have always, of research, have actually emerged as a pushback against very mainstream, large-scale data gatheration methodologies. It has been to bring back storytelling and lived experiences of women into the whole loop of evidence, evidence making, if I may say so. But, we've closed that gap. It doesn't happen anymore. There's a push again for big data and big, evidences. why can't we bring that whole system back into using lived experiences of young women and others and using them as data and evidence? One of the things that I want to kind of, really urge us all to do is to reimagine data and evidence gathering, and how can we do that with storytelling. I'm not scrolling through Facebook. I'm just trying to kind of get to my point. Sorry. So one of the things that stories give us is the unseen data. So if you review our program in UP, you will see 30% of girls are kind of stepping out of home, completing education, and joining the workforce. And sometimes they're taking up occupations that they were not pursuing even 10 years ago. So they're becoming wells person. They become plumber. They're becoming LIC agents, which was not we work in rural areas, and that's not a thing that you saw in rural areas. But the stories behind them are much deeper. If I just take one story of Nita, who stepped out of her home, learned sewing and thing, which is a very common thing that's available to all women, and went to work in a garment factory. Her livelihood actually forced her mother to break out of a cycle of abuse in her husband's home after her husband's death, and go take the family to court to demand a piece of the property, which was a legal thing. They won the case. Nita and her mother have stepped out now. They live on their own. Nita works here. Mother works in the garment factory. Mother has opened a catering business. Stories like this are never seen when you collect data. Stories like this are done when you're actually mining for stories and not just for data. So one of the things like that. Second thing, I'd like to just touch on a little bit. You saw the Khadar girls, experience. Why can't we use methodologies like walking methodologies, where young people are talking about their geography and the problem that is there with their geography? I'll just take one more story, which is a story of our young people from Dabua colony. Dabua is a small colony in Faridabad, and very, gender-based violence, dark street corners, daru ka theka, alcohol stores and everything about there. And girls used to feel really unsafe, and for that, their parents kind of read them the riot act that you can't step out of home after dark. When we started working with them and we asked them, what do you want to do? They said, this is what we want to work on. We want mobility. We want to go out. So they created a 3D model, using soft clay and other scrap materials to show what Dabua colony is like at present. No lights, no CCTV cameras, no toilets, nothing. And then they created another model with green spaces and, all of lights and all of that. And they took that to the ward councillor's office, who would not let them enter his office before. But they took them to the ward councillor's office, sat there down and said, this is what we want. It's been 1.5 years of work. I'm happy to say there have been 15 street lights installed in Dabua colony. And there's 118 CCTV cameras across all the places where there used to be, harassment and alcoholism and other kind of things. So if you center young people's voice, if you ask them, what do you want to see in the research that you are doing? We recently did that with about 25 marginalized tribal and Dalit girls in Jharkhand. We asked them, we want to do a study on, gender equity curriculums in government schools. What would you like to see in that study? So they kind of really, told us that this is what we would like to. So if, like Anshul said, can we focus on bringing young people's voices and stories to the center, not just about their lives, not just about decision-making about their lives, but bigger issues like the environment, the climate change, like gender, like livelihoods. And if we bring their stories to the foremost, and if we kind of start looking at their stories as data, I think we'd be doing ourselves a lot of good turns. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohini. What I'm hearing from you is we need to collaborate with diverse, unusual stakeholders and partners, and that media is one of them, that we really need to bring them to be a part of this journey and contribute to the change that we want to see, and youth to be included in this. But you're also saying that we need to reimagine the power of storytelling. You're saying that when you excavate more, the unseen data, I'm hearing the unintended outcomes with the young girl who actually then asked for justice and rights for her mother. and address the system of abuse. So there are so many things. Just an entry point is the data gathering and the micro narratives, the lived experiences. I'm going to pause here, and I know I'm going to do, and I'm known for this, I'm going to do something different from the rest of the other panels. I'm going to now ask a couple of questions from the audience here. Is there, I mean, I'm sure you guys are working with young people. Who is directly working with the young people? Is anyone there? Right, great, good. Can I take a couple of questions or comments, short ones, because I am shaving off time from my, panelists, but I would like a little bit more conversation style from the floor as well. So can we get a couple? Who can we get? Is there a mic around? Yeah. Yes. Who would like to contribute? Is there a comment or a short and sharp experience about youth as evidence builders, or work that you're doing with youth that you would like to share?
Thanks for this, because it's been wonderful listening to all of you, but there have been so many questions from the morning. I'm Laura Prabhu from an NGO called Sequin, that's Center for Equity and Inclusion, and we run a football program for girls. Getting them out to claim public spaces, and in that whole process of the journey from the home to the park, how they navigate that space, and basically normalizing girls playing in public parks. And what that does, simply by just that strong visual imagery of those girls playing out there, what it does to that whole community. They just get used to those girls challenging stereotypes, accessing spaces, etc. And I just thank you for that whole thing about the importance of storytelling. And how do you make that case? How do you tangibly really capture what you're doing when you're engaging these young people? And this whole point that one entry point leads to so many multiple outcomes. Also about the fact that you really, in the earlier panel, there was this whole thing about who are you targeting, who are you working with? We're working with the whole ecosystem. Yes, youth being a central part of it, but you really can't bring about change if you only work with that one person. It's a holistic kind of a thing. And that's where the challenge also is for organizations like ours when we're trying to pitch our work. In this whole space where there's this corporatization of NGOs and a lot more CSR funding. Who's your target audience? How are you pitching it? What's the data? What's the impact? It's a real struggle. If they just come and see what's happening on the ground, they'll just get it. Yeah. But it's such a challenge to capture that and put it out there.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. We also have one more hand, maybe two. And then we'll make it short so that we get both.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Shipta this side. I work with the organization called YLAC, which is Young Leaders for Active Citizenship. We particularly work with young people across India to engage them in the citizenship and in policy-making process. We've actually worked with a lot of you, and our forte is working with young people. Just want to share a little experience in the sense that, young people really surprise us all the time. I think a lot of us go in with the perception that a lot of them may not know what they're doing, what they're talking about, may not have a lot of knowledge. It's just that knowledge is hard for them to translate into language, because the language is so different and it's always evolving, it's always changing. Even in our team itself, we are a young team, we're a small team, and there's not a big age gap, but we see the difference in language and the difference in the articulate. So a lot of times the difference in articulation is taken as a sign of not being knowledgeable or not being able to say what they want to say. But I think young people surprise you. In one of the programs that we did, it's called the incubator program, where we done a competition for young people to come up with ideas. The kind of ideas they came up with were more cognizant of their own surroundings than we were. And I think that is the point, that young people know what's happening in their lives better than we do. Is just that they need to have that language, and we need to be able to understand the language that they're communicating to us with.
Thank you. Amen to that. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Last one. Yeah. Then we have to return to our panel.
I'm Nandita from Akshara Center, which is based in Mumbai, and we work with young people. And I have been talking to all of you. It's, we are finding that they're so engaging in terms of getting the data and evidence, and we constantly have them gather data and even to extent present it to the policymakers. But the process of engagement, of change that happens, which is a very long-term change, how do we engage young people in that process? Because they don't have the time. I mean, they are there as either studying or they are there. So then that falls on to something that we are doing, but how do we keep engaging? So that is a challenge that we are constantly working with. So I thought I'll just put it forward as a question.
No, thank you very much, because that is the access to young people, especially adolescents, 15 to 18. This is a very challenging time, isn't it? And so much of pressure from family and what have you. But I'm also hearing, I think one of the social ecosystem, Laura was talking about that we can't just work with one individual or one agency. We have to look at it in its totality, and also show, everyone's connected. And talking of being connected is my next panelist, Moitreyee Sinha, who has a PhD in, guess what? Physics. And she is a connector. She has been guided by the core belief that everything in this world is connected. And we're hearing that. And that large-scale social transformation happens when people, communities, institutions work together. So, Moitreyee, you have led the GE Foundation's global health portfolio in 22 countries, forging connections across cultures and sectors to build multi-stakeholder initiatives in maternal child health and technology for health. As the CEO of citiesRISE, Moitreyee brings her unique vision for collective and community-based action to the issues of mental health, mobilizing cities, breaking down barriers, and unifying people and institutions together in the service of helping others. So we are hearing, Moitreyee, that, cities are, of course, they are vibrant hub of multiple opportunities. They are centers of, resources, dreams, aspirations, as Anshul were talking, and so many different unintended outcomes when we involve people. But they're also a complex web of power dynamics. Earlier panels were all touching on this top issue. Imbalances and failed projects. It is easy to become alienated and disillusioned in a fast-paced, urban environment. And technology, we heard that technology is an enabler. Now, technology is, while an enabler, and democracy is also proving to be a cause of, it's also proving to be a cause of mental health, which Anshul, you were talking about. You touched on this. We know that no one single actor can unilaterally solve these complex issues. So collaborations between diverse actors from different spaces are critical. My question to you is, can you reflect on an example where citiesRISE was able to facilitate and broker multi-sectoral partners who brought visibility to the hidden mental health challenges faced by young people today? How can we, again, loaded questions, so take your time. How can we form solidarity when working with issues that are inherently isolate those affected? How do we seek unusual partnerships? We've been hearing a little bit about that are critical to forge collective vision. Can you reflect on how evidence can be used and generated to enable collective action? To address youth well-being issues?
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you all. And Kalpana, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share this special moment with you and your team. Really excited to talk about how cities can be the places for transformation And especially when you think about mental health and well-being, it's an issue where we need a paradigm shift in how we as a society think about it, not just as a burden or as an illness lens, but something that is fundamental to our well-being and something that is humanity's greatest asset. So would love to take up your offer to share a couple of examples in how youth can be the centers of transformation. So when we started the work in Chennai, I think the first questions are, where are the young people? What are the systems that need to change? And how do you link youth to the systems that need to change? Because over and over we found that preaching to systems doesn't really work. Whereas when you link youth to systems, that has a power of transformation that's way faster and much more catalytic than other ways. So we ran 3 processes. One is what we call the rapid assessment response, essentially looking at different types of evidence, not just what's there in terms of programs and policies, but what is young people's own insights, what's their wisdom, what's working, what's not working. So how do you tap into that intelligence? The second process we ran is something called the Youth Challenge Award. Wherever we went, where do you find the young leaders? Who are the ones who've transformed their own pain, suffering, trauma to find new ways of bringing innovation in their own local ecosystems? And then how do you convene multiple stakeholders? So the researchers, the mental health professionals, the social entrepreneurs, the youth, the policymakers, how do you start creating that space for some of these conversations to happen? So through that process for Chennai, through the youth leaders and getting the different stakeholders together, schools became the priority, where young people wanted to see how schools can become places for transformation for mental health and well-being. So then that started the process for the next level of collaboration. And the way we kind of looked at that is that, again, where is the formal evidence? So look across India, across the world, and there's amazing stuff, innovations happening in schools. So whether it's whole school model in Australia, mental health literacy from Canada, Hope from Ireland, but then locally in Chennai, arts and education, and there was so much amazing innovation work there. So how do you tap again into community's own wisdom, and how do you think about linking that to the status of current research and science? And then that's where the youth, along with the mental health NGOs, along with the entrepreneurs who were working in the school systems, and we selected the intersection of arts and education as an entry point, because when you think of mental health and well-being, it's a very complex subject, and it's something where didactic curriculum or talking about in a rational way doesn't really help young people explore that. So the medium of arts opens up a new way of looking at it. But again, the partnership with youth, and I'll just give a couple of quick examples. Through this process of the last few years, we started seeing how changes can happen, and I'll mention 3 examples. One was the impact of the research and the field of science itself. So I come from the private sector, so there's sort of like the thing that we always keep in mind is who is the customer. And so if this is youth, and they need to be at the center of the transformation, so how do you flip that model, and how can science come to the service of humanity as opposed to science dictating its own level of maturity to what comes into the system? So through that process, what we were able to do is that increasingly by working with youth and linking them to the research, disciplines such as not just mental health, but neuroscience, youth development, spirituality, recovery, how can all of these fields come together? So youth started playing an interesting role in research, where first they would be the informants. So very often when adults are doing research, they don't even know the right questions to ask, because it's very hard for them to understand the reality of the youth. So in the first place, they play the role of the informants, and then they get trained in research, because when young people go and ask the research questions, the space they provide to other youth, the type of information we're able to get, we're not able to get in traditional research. So through that process, the researchers started shifting. The second area where we started seeing shifting happen with the mental health professional, it's a very, very clinical model. And the whole initiative that started with youth and the mental health professionals, Chennai Psychiatric Association, and now it's social workers and others, is what they called the clinic to community. How do you get mental health professionals out of their clinics and really understand that they need to build the capacity of communities? So again, by linking youth to that system started to shift. And then the school ecosystem itself. There was such rapid innovation capacity that got built right now that there was the ability to see that with young people that we were able to understand that mental health literacy curriculum, not particularly effective. On the other hand, context-based education, where young people come with actual experience with other youth with lived experience, had massive transformative shifts. Then the use of new types of innovations, like how do you bring practices like gratitude, kindness, hope? How do you build the inner capacity of young people so that they can become the agents of change? And then how do you create structural changes in school? Simple structural changes like a hope advisory board, where youth and teachers and families come together and decide what needs to change in the school environment. Anyway, there are multiple levels of innovations that starts happening when you build that innovation capacity within the community. I'll give one more quick example. In Nairobi, which was another city that we started working in, the youth there decided that colleges and communities the settlements were going to be the starting point. And very often we found that in mental health and well-being, arts and culture was the language of youth. So to just give an example, in the settlements of Nairobi, the there with youth, the mental health professionals or the policymakers, and Nairobi being the capital, it was both at the national level, but also at the Nairobi City County level. And the researchers, they started the journey, and with youth, there's a whole new innovation that emerged out of that called gathering spaces. And essentially the idea was that how do you create pro-social spaces? Because youth were attracted to creative and other types of engagements. And through that process, the conversation around mental health, the awareness, and the different types of capacity building, it just became a starting point of that. That work then became, again, a new way of intervention. And again, by linking the cities, Seattle, for instance, right now is taking what Nairobi is doing and adapting that with the LGBTQ plus communities as well as the immigrant youth. And youth are co-creators in all of these. And what we are finding is very fascinating, like the work in schools in Chennai, the European Union has now picked that up, and they're having Stockholm and Cape Town, Nairobi. And so this process of multiple levels of collaboration with youth at the center of transformation, and then how policy can shift or research can shift or practice can shift, that you can actually see very rapid changes in pretty short time. So I'm going to pause there.
Oh, that was just brilliant. It was just extraordinary. Thank you so much for sharing that. But one line I'll take from you, which was just, coming from the NGO sector, the word beneficiary comes all the time in our proposals, in our, language, in, our vocabularies that, oh yeah, we need to do things for the beneficiaries. Whereas what you have done is look at them as customers, as corporate, the world looks at as who you're dealing with, and bringing solutions to them and work with them closely to co-create solutions. They are your clients, right? And that is so important too. That frame of mind has to be, the way we think. We ourselves need to go through transformation to create new energies and new synergies within the, with multiple different partners, take unusual kind of road and journeys, and be prepared to be surprised. I think that's what you're talking about. My next, thank you so much for that amazing, I think, case study that you have shared with us. I would like to introduce Ms. Kanak Tewari. And Kanak, you are with the National Urban Institute of Urban Affairs, and you're the program director in the Urban Strategy Unit. You're an urban designer and development practitioner at NIUA. You are handling 2 projects as team lead. That includes child-friendly smart cities. And you have extensively worked in the areas of urban governance and policy, participatory urban planning, urban services, mobility, smart urbanism. we are hearing, of course, that there are so many different, cities have not historically, so many different narratives from different panelists as well as from our audience here. Cities have not historically taken the perspectives of women or young people in urban design, planning, and governance. In India, now, as we heard, I'll repeat it again, that half the population is under 30. And their aspirations and well-being must be, that's the call for action, must be reflected in planning and policies. So can I get you to reflect on what kind of strategies were considered to ensure the development of Delhi master plan was, participatory, consultative? How did you ensure young people were included in the city planning process to foster a more inclusive and equitable city? And given NIUA is managing Child-Friendly Cities initiative, what space were created to give children the voice, their opinions, their aspirations, the knowledge they have that they could contribute to and bring the evidence to the planning process?
Thank you. First of all, congratulations, Safetipin, for completing 10 years of very, very impactful work. And I'm really happy to be here and learn about all of the amazing work that you all are doing. Because you're working really very close to the ground, very close to the people. And here on this panel, I bring the perspective of policy, because while I believe that each and every individual story is important and should actually contribute to data that is hidden and not seen, I also believe in the power of policy and intervention, and at policy level to actually enhance that impact, to increase participation of people in not only their everyday lives, but also in how the governing bodies respond to their daily needs. So I'll bring to you all the journey of the master plan for Delhi, the next one, which is for 2041, for which National Institute of Urban Affairs was a partner with the Delhi Development Authority. And we prepared the draft with the planning agency. And I can say that without doubt, this was the most consultative master plan till date in the history of Delhi. And there are so many collaborators sitting over here in the audience who do not actually belong to my organization, but to several other organizations. And these include Safetipin and people from organizations that were part of the Maybe Delhi campaign. So just one thing that, in the middle of the master plan preparation process, COVID-19 hit. And while we had a very, very ambitious program of taking the plan to each of the 272 wards of Delhi, those area sabhas had to be cancelled. And technology came to the rescue. And we actually had a very extensive online engagement process during the master plan. We were able to, for the first time, actually have people's participation during the preparation of the master plan, rather than after the fact sharing the plan in the public domain and inviting objections, suggestions from the public. So again, another first. And, I will come to the youth bit of the participatory process a little later, but there were 4 major learnings of this process. And number 1 was involve decision makers. And even if they don't believe in the participatory process, try and get them to sit at the table, because, otherwise all these processes keep happening. But whatever those stories, those impacts are, they are not heard by the people who are actually going to be responsible for the decisions. So, and especially those ones who don't believe in this, you should call them and make them sit at the table. The second one is involve people from different contexts. What happened through the course of this participatory process is that we realized that sometimes it's the same kind of people who are giving their opinions. So we had to have people from informal settlements as well as from planned settlements, from institutes, from academic institutes. So the entire spectrum of people who are part of the city, who live in this city and work here. The third very important thing is involve the people and agencies that work with people. And that is where one of the, I would say it was one of the most powerful points, powerful, I would say, engagement, because we had this Main Bhi Delhi campaign somehow partner with National Institute of Urban Affairs. I won't get into how that partnership happened, but it also happened because we were not the planning agency. We were an agency in between that was looking at preparing a draft master plan with new paradigms of planning. And Main Bhi Delhi campaign had already been talking to people for about 4 years, taking the previous master plan to them and trying to sort of what you call demystify all of the planning terms for them. So it really helped at the time of COVID to have representatives of people talk to them and get people on board for this exercise. And the fourth and very important thing is that while you want to involve the decision makers, you cannot involve them unless you have data. So we have to generate data and have the numbers that will actually mobilize the decision makers to take the kind of decisions that one is looking for. Now I'll just anecdotally share the engagement of youth in this. So 80% of our team of the master plan was comprised of youth. And one day they came up to us and they said that we would like to have a feedback that is specifically from the youth of the city. And can we therefore organize something which will get the opinions of the youth of the city? And they designed this entire exercise where 3 youth sabhas were held, all online, of course. One was for youth learning in the city, that is in schools and colleges in the city. The second one was for youth working in the city, so moving around using public transport. And third one was for youth living in the city and using the public spaces and their various areas of recreation. Once these 3 sabhas happened, we got really, and like many people say, youth tend to surprise us with the inputs and with the inputs that they gave. They really gave such valuable inputs for each and every policy area of the master plan. And you'll see the outcomes of those that have been included in the master plan. And there was a 4th youth sabha that was held when the youth requested that we need to have a special sabha for youth with disability. So we also had that whole process. Some of the outcomes of this process, and I believe that the master plan is a powerful document because it's a statutory document. It'll get things done on ground. So some of these things, just to not forget, some of the big outcomes. More hostels for girls, open spaces, facilities for people with disability, community facilities for youth, especially during disasters and pandemics, that can be used by all people in the community. Then multi-facility plot, which means you get mixed use together. Somebody talked about, the girl in the video talked about places getting dark. So monofunctional areas, to not have them anymore, to make more mixed use, vibrant areas. New norms for hostels, strengthen networks during disasters and pandemics, facilities for internet, sports, and the youth also shared that we would not like to own cars anymore. Now, we don't have data for this. I mean, we cannot for sure say that 90% of the youth don't want to own cars. But the people who participated said, well, we don't want to own cars. We want to use the public transport. Some of them even said, we don't want to own properties in Delhi. Can we have more rental homes? Can we have more dormitories, hostels? Can we have small format housing that we can afford? So, these were some of the inputs that helped. One could say that people of Delhi have voiced their opinion about these things. So those policies got strength out of this. So this was, mainly this experience of the master plan. I have a lot to share, but I'll stop here. Just the child-friendly smart cities initiative. I have to say one thing, that initiative really came before the master plan and opened our eyes to all of the issues that children face in our cities. And and we sort of focused, after a few years, we focused on children between 3 to 5 years of age. And we saw that it's a program called Urban 95, which is 95 centimeters, the height of a child 3 to 5 years old. So we tried to see the city from that height, and we saw that there was, smoke coming out of cars in our faces, and there was, people's bags banging against our heads. There was a lot of such thing happening in public spaces, and that's why you don't see many young children and babies moving out in public areas in our cities, and that needs to change. So I can share more when we ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanak. You have really outlined all the realities of the young people, which normally we don't ask the questions, we don't consider them, we don't include them. Almost, for normally it's not just in India, all across all cultures. There is I think the young people feel that they're invisible till they become adults, and that's what you're trying to break, and which is extraordinary in this process. As you said, in Delhi, it has not happened before. So I'm glad the process has started, and there'll be more inclusion. Not only that, monitoring of this master plan by young people is the aspiration I have, that they'll bring regularly the gaps of there's a document, and how do you make it a living document, right? On that note, let me now introduce you to Sonali. Sonali, of course, you have been the face of this. You need no introduction. So what let me just introduce you a little bit. Sonali is Associate Director of Safetipin. She's an architect, urban planner. She has worked. Worked hand in hand with government and non-government stakeholders. She's a part of the global community of feminists, and working for safe and inclusive cities. You've published on using big data to create safer and inclusive cities. Can you reflect on how agencies such as Safetipin, you've been hearing this all the time. Safetipin's done amazing work, and you've been valuable partners for city governments. And we heard the previous panelists talking about bring the data to the decision makers, don't get rhetoric. You need real evidence, and then that's when they will take notice. What is the role of technology in empowering youth to co-produce knowledge that fuels advocacy at the local and national level? How do we ensure we promote young people's agency to frame and shape policies, local to global?
Thank you, Joyati. I'll try to answer that question in two folds. The first part of the question, I want to focus on technology. We have all heard technology is an enabler. Technology is also a leveler, a great leveler. We have been able to collect voices, diverse voices, intersectionality, and we have been able to try to reduce this exclusion from our cities. So the first thing that we have been doing is collecting data right from people, crowdsourcing data on safety. What do people feel in the city, especially young women? And we do understand that even now, even in this digital age, the ownership of phones mostly lies with men, not women. Women are still excluded. So we have been able to partner with various stakeholders, including non-government organizations, to include more and more people and talk to them and understand what do they want in cities. And that's where we feel that technology has been a very crucial catalyst for us. And we didn't just stop at that. We have to now get one step ahead, because technology is not just giving data, but how do you translate that into an actionable insights that can actually help policymakers? So to the second part of your question, how do we actually work with young people and especially their agency? And Anshul talked about that, young people are future of our nation. We have to start now. So that also includes empowering young people to actually think for their own city. So this, I would like to give an example from our recent project, Cities for Youth. When we were working with young people, when we were engaging with them, when when we were trying to explain them the idea of safety audit, there was a shift. There was a shift in their perspective on how they were looking at their own cities, how they were looking at their own neighborhoods. Their narratives changed from I, me, myself to we as a city. They were able to collect evidence, collect data, just to think that, the city seems safe to me, but it is not safe for somebody who is new to the city. Let me collect that data. Let me be part of that movement. So that was a big shift. And also they realized in the process, they also realized that their voice has a value. And in the morning session, the panelists were talking about articulating right, going to the right department. So that's where Safetipin also plays a role as a platform, bridging a platform between young people and the policymakers on how do you translate that data in an actual way to advocate for what do I want for my city, what impacts my well-being. I need to understand, the data will not make any sense if you just present it. You will have to say, I understand this particular road. This is a road which 80% of young people use, and I have interviewed many people, because we actually engage young people. They were the ones who were talking to the pedestrians, gathering that data, and then presenting it to the policymakers in the way they understand. And it is a very important step, because young people need to realize that they are active citizens of the city, and in becoming so, they need to be in active voices. And one of the other example I wanted to share was that yes, we do need to ask young people, how are they looking at their growth? When we are doing so many programs, one of the programs that we have recently started in Ajmer with MJAS, Mahila Jan Adhikar Samiti, we asked young people that what do you want? We don't want to run another program for you, but we do want to know that what is it that would help you in getting you to live better in your own city, or to grow better in your city. What is it that you would like to learn from us? And that's where the young people actually surprised us, and they were very active, and they said that we know this, but we would really be interested in knowing this. How can I understand data? And they were very excited about data. They are the early adopters of technology, so we have to use their they are very active. They are willing to do it, but it's just that we have to tap that path. And how earlier we were talking about a good tech and a weird tech. They are interested in posting, but how do we actually make sure that it is actually valuable and it will be going to the right urban policymaker? Another major outcome I wanted to share was from the city of Jaipur. As you saw, this young woman and the group, once they started seeing, oh, I can talk, I will be the one who will be talking the data, not the other lot of us, we have done our part, but we now have to push these young people to talk more and bring them in front of the policymakers. And they actually felt really empowered. They were the ones who actually went to in a community, went around signing petitions, submitting it to councillor. They actually owned it, and that's the big part, ownership. At the end of the day, it comes all down to the ownership. Young people want to own their city. They just didn't know how, and we really have to move that part and move that needle. So, thank you.
Wonderful. And that's what Safetipin has done so well, training the, young, your target, audience and target groups with different kind of communication tactics and strategies to, from the pedestrians to the policymakers. How do you bring those stories that they have, how they see the data, how they deliver the message? Messaging is so important, you are saying, to the target group that you want to change. I want to bring last point back, Anshul, to you about is this the right journey? Are we on the right journey? Do you feel that you are able to see ambassadors of change for young people? How do we find them? We've heard so many different strategies but it's still just a shift in the needle, isn't it? Of the needle. So over to you to just share with us, how do we bring those ambassadors in different, especially in government?
No, thank you so much for that question. Also, it's extremely heartening to hear the importance of storytelling on the panel. I'm personally extremely passionate about it. When YK started 15 years ago, this is pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter, the idea was that young people should be able to tell their stories in their own way. So what happened in the 15 years, and you also had asked, do we have examples of how young people come together and so on? What happened in the 15 years is that more than 1 million people use the Youth ki Awaaz platform to tell stories. Today, YK has 6 million stories across issues. Any issue that you pick up in the country, there'll be a story on the Youth ki Awaaz platform. It's also become the most diverse community of queer writers, Dalit writers, writers from Adivasi communities, and so on and so forth, right? And what we realized 5 years ago is that all of these stories is actually data. It's actually evidence of what young people are dealing with, what they're going through on a day-to-day basis. And we've reached a point where we've managed to capture a very large sensibility of what young people are dealing with, right? So how do we then turn that into policy? How do we then turn that into action, into collaboration? Which is when a lot of our work started going in the direction of understanding and identifying where do champions in youth communities actually exist. And we realized that many young people have an aspiration to become leaders. They have the aspiration to become change makers. And like I said in my previous answer, often systems discourage us from becoming these change makers or having access to those opportunities. So we started working specifically in the area of building these opportunities in small communities, communities that have just got access to technology, are for the first time accessing a platform like a Facebook or Instagram and so on, right? And we launched something called the Youth ki Awaaz Action Network, which was basically, we started with, we worked on 3 issues: menstrual hygiene management, climate change, and now we're working on right to education and the new education policy. When we started working on menstrual hygiene management, we already had close to 120,000 stories of young people from different communities on MHM challenges that they are facing. We turned those into not just policy documentation, but we actually turned those into strategies of engaging with young people. What are the inlets that exist for young people that they're already talking about, that they're already saying that, okay, this is what I need, this was my experience, and so on and so forth. A lot of these members actually wanted to do something about it. So when we set up the Action Network Fellowship and we opened applications, we got 6,000 people applying to just become change makers working on MHM. We selected about 500 of them, and we actually got an international agency to fund 130 of them between 50,000 to 5 lakh rupees to start their own organizations. Out of those 130 people, 70 organizations are still running. The recent consultation that happened on the draft MHM policy that is being created, through our community, we were actually able to make 6,000 submissions to that policy. When we realized that that's the degree of success that you can actually achieve if you're able to get young people together, we started replicating it for other issues. Climate change became even bigger for us. It became drastically bigger actually for us as an opportunity, because we realized that people are dealing with climate change every single day. They're seeing the impacts of it, but the verbalization of it doesn't exist. You can say climate change in English, but in Hindi, it's called Jalvayu Parivartan. But that's only water, air. everything else gets completely ignored, right? So we realized that when you go to smaller regions, for young people to be able to identify an issue as a climate change issue, you have to build the language for it. So we started building the language for it. And slowly and steadily what ended up happening was that we created a community of close to 500 young people from across the country, mostly from vulnerable populations who are bearing the brunt of climate change, come together and make 3 policy documents. One on how India should transition to renewable energies. Second, what is the aspiration, economic aspiration that young people have? And third, how do you do all of it while protecting vulnerable populations? And the success of the documents was that very recently, we actually partnered with NIUA. We signed an MOU with NIUA to create something called the RISE City Framework, which will be a framework for how cities should be engaging with young people before they make their climate action plan, not after they make their climate action plan, right? And I have to, of course, appreciate the work that NIUA has done, because that was the first ever time a government agency brought us in and said that, listen, can we work together, and can all of this information that you're creating actually feed into the work that's being organized on our end already. So I feel like the learning that this actually gave us was that influencers within the youth community often exist right there. We don't need to find external stimuli to be able to engage with young people. I think we need to go to young people, find people who are wanting to engage and willing to engage, and find exactly what you need to enable them. I'll just give one last example that we recently actually achieved a big win on. We work with a community of young people who tell stories on access to education for young girls. And one of the biggest issues that came from Assam was that private schools under the RT are mandated to take children who are economically weaker, and so on and so forth. But in many of the schools, that was not happening. Surprisingly, about 50 stories from Assam came. A community of law students reached out to us to work with those students. They petitioned the Assam High Court, and they won the case against the private schools as well as the government that was not acting on it. And now they're using that order by the Assam High Court to go to every single state in the country and do an assessment of where are the private schools where children are not being inducted. So youth leaders and change makers often emerge from the most unlikely of places. It's just about being a facilitator at the right time for that to happen.
I knew it up really well and do my job. Thank you for that. We do have 2 minutes, and as per my, very kind of just wanted to reach out to you guys because you're sitting and listening to these amazing speakers, their experiences, their, unusual outcomes. Couple of hands if you have a comment, something you want to share, because we do have just about a couple of minutes. I'm stretching it, but why not?
Yes, some good news.
Oh, you want to say something? There are hands.
Right. So just saying that, yes, NIUA also realized in its journey that, to engage with youth is extremely important. And we now have a dedicated youth unit at NIUA. And as I was also part of the Urban 20, which is under the G20, the engagement group that talks about cities. And you can see the communique of Urban 20 online. It has specific mention of youth and women and how they have to be involved in all the processes. Apart from this, there is an upcoming project. Hopefully, that project will, in partnership with ADB, in the northeast regions of the country, the northeastern states, where in every state, young fellows, ADB young fellows, will be appointed by an NIUA so that people can work with the government in the state departments and the municipalities of the Northeast, because they did not want to build the capacities only of the people who are there in the ecosystem, but retain talent, retain their own young people to work there and create opportunities for them to work there. So some of the good initiatives that we are doing it in.
Is there anyone, a couple of hands, anyone wants to? has to be shortened.
I think I've already spoken that. I just want to add one last point. I think what Anshul said was absolutely right, that change makers already exist. It's just the systems don't enable them to come out as such. And I think for a large scale approach, one thing we're also very particular about and organizations should work towards and strive towards is also enabling systems to change. How do we make systems more inclusive of accepting youth voices? How do we ensure that systems became facilitators of change instead of organizations like ours or individuals like us? So can you make schools more inclusive? Can you make schools the ecosystem where you can have that space for youth leaders to come out? Can you make your local communities more inclusive of the same? So I think that's also an approach that we must shift to, where we also recognize the importance of system change so that can better facilitate young voices to come out.
Thank you very much. I want to draw it to a close because we are over time, 3 minutes. I just want to say to Safetipin, what this panel has exposed to you is you're not alone, and I know you knew that you're not alone. But there is just so much of experience and also the innovation, new perspectives to foster collaboration. To join the journey. It's just extraordinary to have youth organizations, NGOs, researchers, and also policy, the change agents that you need in every sector. And we've been able to hear from them. So thank you to all of you for joining me on this panel. And to our audience, thank you for your contributions and for staying awake at a very difficult hour of the afternoon. Yes, post-lunch. All the best to everyone, and we look forward to continuing our conversations with you.
There's a tea break now, but yeah. So we'll continue the conversation and then we'll resume at 4:30.
That is very important.